Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Hash It Out. My name is Justin Moorhead. I'm here, as always, with my good buddy, Mitchell B. Evans, and we're here to talk about Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 15 through 23. So on Hash It Out, what we do is we take the most recent sermon that was preached, and right now we're preaching through Nehemiah here at Woodlawn, and we use that most recent sermon as kind of a springboard into some additional conversation. Implications or applications about the text, or just something that it might lead us into a different conversation altogether, but hopefully one that would be edifying and helpful to each of you. So so that's kind of what we're doing today. Nehemiah 4:15 to 23, this is what's going on, is they're building this wall. Mm-hmm. And they're building the wall, and Nehemiah is covering that building, but in this passage, I'll read verse 18 really quick. It says, "And each of the builders had his sword strapped at his side while he built." So there's this idea that they're needing to defend themselves against opposition while they continue in their work. In the sermon, we're talking about building up our faith and how that can be really difficult, like building a wall. And at various points, we need to be prepared and thoughtful about defending that work, defending the building of our faith. So that's really more how the sermon addressed this passage. However, what Mitch and I have been talking about, and what we want to talk to you about today, is this passage is very commonly referenced when people talk about self-defense and carrying weapons. Because the passage is clearly talking about them being strapped, literally having a sword strapped to their side while they're working. So in a region like ours in the Southeast in the United States, people were very interested in carrying guns, open carry, concealed carry, these kinds of things. And this is a passage that really gets referenced often as a proof for why that would be okay.
Absolutely.
So, so that's what we want to talk about today, is really this kind of self-defense idea. So what does the Bible say about our right to protect ourselves and those sorts of things? Maybe just to kind of introduce the topic as a whole, Mitch, do you think, seeing how this passage has been used as a text in that way, any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah. One I should have told you beforehand.
Hey.
ChatGPT.
It's wonderful.
You ask it, what are Bible verses that support self-defense with a weapon? It gave two verses initially, Exodus 22, 2 and 3, and then the very second one, Nehemiah 4, 17 to 18. Oh. And so it is this passage. I think if somebody were saying, what is the Bible's commentary on self-defense, and they went to Google or whatever. Yeah. Right? Nehemiah at this point, verses 17 and 18, is going to come up really quickly.
Sure.
So I think it's worth kind of diving into, working through how should a Christian understand, if I could narrow it slightly, self-defense with a lethal weapon.
Okay, there you go.
So I think there's a ton you could talk about. One about like pushing somebody away or whatever else. So we tried to get it all the way down to what seems to be most present in Nehemiah. Self-defense with a sword. It also references that other groups had spears. So they're not just saying we're gonna, if they came near us, we're gonna hit them or shove them back. Right? So self-defense with a lethal weapon, I think, is a good, helpful thing, because our society very much thinks guns is a major way of self-defense, right? We're not usually talking about pepper spray when we have concerns. Everybody seems to be fine with pepper spray.
Sure.
Like your tacos hot, pepper spray, right?
Right.
So it tends to be guns. So if I could narrow it slightly, I probably should have.
No, that's good. And you always hear, or I've heard at least, when thinking about carrying a weapon, is you don't pull this thing, you don't point this thing unless you intend to take someone's life. It's not just a deterrent. It is a gun anyway, a lethal weapon. I mean, that's the only thing it's made for, is killing. So I mean, this being the idea, I think is helpful. This is a thought that I have, very legitimate thought. If we take the New Testament seriously, just kind of on straight up terms, it seems like, in particular, it comes to mind for me, the Sermon on the Mount, to love your enemies, to turn the other cheek, blessed are the peacemakers. I think that there would be a lot that people would say, well, it feels like Jesus is wanting us to not return violence with violence, but instead to be more kind of submissive in that moment. I think that seems like very clearly what it's saying. So do Christians have the right, so to speak, to defend their life with lethal force?
Yeah, I think the classically, you would say there's been two camps. You're either pro self-defense with lethal force or what's called a pacifist. Americans kind of take a third view, and so many Americans would say, well, we should own guns and be willing to use them because that's the teeth to our liberty.
Right.
And so I think there's a whole lot to talk through. If we, again, stay just at kind of that narrow view, I want to defend myself. So we're not talking about gun rights as a whole.
Right.
But I want to defend myself, and I'm going to use some form of lethal force. A spear, maybe somebody's carrying a spear around.
Maybe.
It's open carry in North Carolina.
That's
carry
right.
a spear.
Got two.
Or guns. Yes, 2 spears. One for each hand. That's a Kenny Chesney song, I think.
That's right.
But much to your point, Matthew chapter 5, turn the other cheek is really commonly cited by somebody who would hold a pacifist view. Personally, I hold neither view.
Okay.
So I don't think either one is right in its totality. So I do not think lethal self-defense is a right position for a Christian. Nor do I think pacifism in totality is the right. I think you should actually, there are times when you should use a weapon, but I think primarily the Bible talks about use of a weapon for defense of others. So Psalm 82, verses 3 and 4, if I could get us there real quickly, is a real helpful passage, crying out to God, wanting justice. But the categories of people he wants justice for, that he thinks right justice would rain down. If we look at verse 3, he says, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. So his prayer to God, please intervene in this way. What I think is helpful is the fatherless category, if we start there.
Right.
The presumption is, you have done something to harm me. If my father had been here, somebody would have come to my defense.
Right.
So this justice is especially new when there's no dad around. You think there's been some horrific incidents of women being attacked on subways in Charlotte. If dad's around,
Right.
it changes the dynamic is the presumption.
Sure.
He may not be able to win the day, but he's going to fight for me. And so this is saying we want justice even for those who don't have dad around. So I would say on a real, kind of surface level, the Bible is insinuating, and other places it's much more explicit, that a father would come to the defense of his children.
And that lethal force would be a legitimate extent to
Yes,
take.
I think very much so. Very much so, that if it comes to, I either need to take you out or you're going to take out my kids,
Sure.
I bear the responsibility to do everything in my power to defend them.
Yes, I think that that's good. And Psalm 82, it definitely, if you think about these categories, justice, rescue, deliverance, weak, fatherless, needy, you kind of get a picture for this. But if I can circle back just a little bit to ask a clarifying question, you were saying that that would be the legitimate use of lethal force for a Christian, but our own individual self-defense would not be legitimate.
Right. I would take a different view. And granted, this is pretty hotly debated even in Christian circles.
Sure.
But I think it's premised on the idea from Matthew 5, where he's saying, turn the other cheek. Jesus is not prescribing that as just a neat way for Christians to be. I think what he's describing is the way that he is.
Yeah.
So he is saying, he is someone who was willing to suffer for the good of those who hated him. So I think his hope is something we would adopt as our hope. So the way I've tried to even write, I wanted to be as clear as I could. So if somebody says, Mitch, why would you say it's right for me to defend my kids and defend my wife even? I would include her in that. I have a responsibility to defend. But then not defend myself with a lethal weapon. So I might push somebody back and try to run away, these sort of things, but not defend myself with a lethal weapon. is my hope lies in the fact that I have faithfully replicated my Savior. He was willing to risk his life for the goodness of another. So I'm going to do my best. My hope is not in prolonging my life here.
Sure.
My hope is in looking as much like Christ as possible. So I'm going to push somebody away, but not bring a gun to that fight.
Yeah.
I'm going to push them away, do whatever I can to defend myself, but not lethally, because I want to be willing to risk my life for the sake of somebody else. So that really, I would say, is the crux of the gospel. That gets heavily debated. I'll give you maybe a couple forms of the debate. Some people would say, well, you should preserve your life because you're the one who's supposed to be there to protect your family.
That's what I was just about to ask. How would you respond? A very common objection.
Yes. So I would say, really, the one there to protect my family is my Father in heaven. Right. He's really the one there to protect my family. So there are many things I might do, like drive a car, that would be risking my life. And so I would say, I should take some reasonable measures in a car. I'm going to wear a seatbelt, this sort of thing. But my own self-preservation is not the only hope my family has.
Do you have a thought about this, even this from prior conversations today, about wives who would be interested in carrying concealed? If the idea, and you were using children as an example, but certainly if wives fall into this category, that if my husband were around, things would have been different. There would have been a different outcome because he would have protected me, even with lethal force. Is it right for you as a husband to kind of grant that type of for your wife to carry a gun and be willing to use lethal force to preserve her own life, or does that then become kind of like you would want her to take the same approach that you would take? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think it's a different approach. So I think a mom is going to protect her kids.
Right.
God does give a hierarchy within the family. So he says the husband is responsible for protecting his family.
Sure.
The mom is not responsible for protecting her husband in the same way that he's responsible for protecting her.
Sure.
Peter talks about it and he says we should honor our wives he's about physical terms, as the weaker vessel.
Right.
So I have an obligation to protect her. She does not, in turn, have the same obligation back. So if a bad guy comes up on the street, I'm not ducking in the car saying, baby, you got the gun, you get him.
Sure. Exactly.
Right? I don't get that opportunity. Furthermore, I would say for a woman, a Christian woman, her hope is also in mirroring Christ.
Right.
So she may protect her kids, but I say the most explicit idea from the Bible is that I want to mirror Christ. He was willing to give up his life for the sake of others and what is best for us. So I would say in my form, I should be willing to risk my life for the sake of others, for what's best for them. And so I think that my hope in the end is not that I will stand before God one day and say, I did everything in my power to preserve my life in perpetuity.
Sure.
I did everything in my power to look just like Jesus.
Sure, absolutely.
That's really what I think the Christian's called to. So I do think there's a role for having a lethal weapon. Somebody breaks into your home. If you're responsible for defending your family, and you say, well, I'm going to go for the butter knife.
Sure.
Right, I think would not be bearing that responsibility well. So I should be thoughtful about that, consider what I'm capable of, all these sorts of things. And I think it's actual defense. There's a well-known pastor, John Piper, got asked a real similar series of questions. He gave a slightly different response than I'm giving, but then he did say that he does not own a gun personally. However, if he did, and somebody broke into his home and he had to defend his family, he would feel obligated to use that gun, but he would aim for their legs.
Sure.
I thought, that's a brother who's never been hunting. That's what that is. So, as somebody who has done a fair amount of hunting, shooting somebody's legs out from under them is a kind of a fool's errand.
Sure.
So I do think you have to really take all of that into account. If I'm going to use this weapon, what does that actually look like? I think you've really got to wrestle that down. What's my best? Some guys would say I'm not a good shot and I'm so bad with a gun they might take it from me and beat me with it.
Right.
And so then, yeah, I think, pick something different. Maybe we're back to the spear. I don't know. But, I think you have a responsibility in that regard. However, my primary responsibility is to look like Christ.
Right.
So I would say maybe just an easy way to do that, to think about that. If my family's with me, I should be equipped to defend them.
Right.
As best I can be, right, within a bunch of reason and qualifiers.
Sure.
If I'm on my own, I'm not going to be equipped in the same way to defend my life to the same degree. I may do. Jesus at times has some people trying to push him off a cliff.
Yeah.
And he makes his way through the crowd and escapes.
Right.
So he's very much, I would imagine, having to push his way through the crowd. I'm out of here. So I don't think it's just whatever happens to me.
Right.
Either. So hopefully that clarifies.
Yeah, I think so. The only other thought I had is, along with this responsibility to protect wives, children, would you go so far as to recommend to husbands that it is a good idea, in order to be faithful to that responsibility, to be familiar with the gun, to pursue those sorts of things, gun permits, these kind of things? Or do you think it's you have permission to use lethal force, but you don't necessarily need to be able to use lethal force?
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer a question with this scenario. I got a Canadian friend of mine. They didn't have guns. He cannot obtain a gun because of their laws very easily.
Right.
They did some kind of buyback thing, he said, at some point. And they confiscated a lot of guns at another point. So where he lives, he was amazed by the familiarity with guns in American culture. However, he agreed with me that he bears responsibility to protect his family. So I said, and if somebody broke into your home, what would you do?
Yeah.
And his first thought was, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good place to be. So should everybody carry a gun and get real familiar with that? I don't know that that's the right answer. Like I said, some guys I think are going to be so poorly trained that that's probably a bad choice. I said many times in a home invasion, a homeowner's gun gets used on them.
Right.
So I think you have to be wise about it.
Sure.
But I think saying I do need to do something, so maybe that's I need to own a gun in my home. Maybe it's some other method. I don't know. You got a taser.
Sure.
I don't know what you got. So, yeah, I would say it's going to be a little bit case by case. But I think to be where my Canadian friend is and just say, I don't know what I would do, is not taking that responsibility real serious either. So, yes, I think for him, he probably holds a closer to a pacifist view, or at least the culture he's in does.
Yeah.
But hopefully that helps. So I would not nail it down. Do you feel like everybody should?
I think I would say something similar. I wouldn't say you got to go have a gun. I think you got to have a plan. If nothing else, you've got to have a reasonable expectation of being able to uphold the responsibility to protect and defend your family. So whatever that means, like a reasonable expectation to be able to do what you need to do in a particular moment. I think firearms are kind of a normative, reasonable way to go about that.
Yeah.
But you can imagine, like you mentioned, that there would be other ways to do it as well. I think what's most kind of engaging and winsome about this whole conversation is that there is something bigger on the table for Christians than the idea of self-defense, and that is being more like Christ.
Yeah.
And that whenever lethal force is considered, it's really in the realm of protect and defend rather than self-preservation. So I think that is a very nuanced and balanced idea behind this idea of lethal force and what our own personal rights are, because you hear this idea of carrying a firearm often talked about in terms of my rights for my own preservation. So I think that's those helpful things for Christians to be thinking about. There's something more important than preserving your own life, and that's being more like Christ.
Absolutely. Yes, I would agree.
Cool. Well, that's it for today. Hopefully this was helpful for all of you. We will be back next time on another edition of Hash It Out.